Welcome back to the Barrel Talk Podcast. We are back with another episode of Let's Talk About It. And today we are going to be continuing our series of doing a deep dive into every single NBA team before this upcoming season. This episode, we have the Golden State Warriors. Now, I'm glad that the kind of Olympics has rolled around and we saw those performances from Stephen Curry, because it's going to help my case for what the Warriors are doing, kind of what the world knows the Warriors should be doing this upcoming season. Very interesting time for the Golden State Warriors, and as a Golden State Warriors fan, looking at this, no Klay Thompson on the roster for the first time in his career. He's with the Dallas Mavericks. That was kind of bittersweet. I think it's something that needed to happen just for the betterment of Klay Thompson. I think Klay Thompson is somebody who needed a change of scenery. I feel like some cases where you saw Klay Thompson really lose his confidence last season, but I'm glad that he's in a different situation, and we're kind of in this new era, this new step in the Golden State Warriors in this version. So looking at this, what they had did last year was really kind of a wake-up call. As a fan, I'm glad something like this happened, because this is going to put more of a focus and an emphasis on making moves, which I'm going to be very realistic. I do love the moves that the Warriors have made this offseason. I think D'Anthony Melton is a huge upgrade from what Chris Paul was giving you. Maybe not the playmaking aspects, but I feel like he's going to be a way better three-point shooter, and he's going to be a menace on the defensive side of the ball, which I think is going to be able to complement a Brandon Podziemski and a Steph Curry perfectly. Another addition was Kyle Anderson. Really like Kyle Anderson as a player, because he's somebody that is going to be able to do all the little things well. He's not somebody that's going to wow you in the box score, but in terms of how the Golden State Warriors play, Kyle Anderson is somebody that is going to set that flare screen for Steph Curry to get open on a pin down, or he's going to set a screen to go screen the screener to get Steph Curry an open three. So he's somebody who's going to do all the little things well, and he's more of like a veteran-minded wing, kind of not in the same realm of like an Andre Iguodala, but he's somebody that can come off the bench and just be a steady guy, somebody that can do a little bit of everything, a Swiss Army knife guy, and those are kind of guys that Steve Kerr loves to have, like an Andre Iguodala, somebody that can bring the ball up the floor if needed, somebody who's not going to turn the ball over crazy, somebody who can just do a little bit of everything, and who is a vet who's been around the league. I feel like that's somebody that's going to desperately help this Golden State Warriors team, who in the past couple of seasons have kind of had a little bit of a lackluster bench, because they don't really have any kind of veteran guys coming off that bench. It was really just they had a veteran starting five, and then they kind of had some like younger pieces off that bench, to where you could see worlds where like they didn't really have the best bench unit, other than last year where the starters weren't the greatest thing in the world, but the bench unit was like top end of the league. That was mainly due to Chris Paul, but I still feel like having D'Anthony Melton and Kyle Anderson off your bench is going to be huge additions. Those are additions I like. And another addition, this is via a trade, Buddy Hield. Now, rocky end of last year. It was kind of a weird fit in Philadelphia, but this is somebody who can hit the three ball at a consistent clip. When you look at the numbers of the three-point makes per year, it's like Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Buddy Hield right in that mix. So looking at that, Buddy Hield is something that they needed to add. They need the shooting. This offense doesn't work without the shooting and the spacing of a Klay Thompson. Not saying that Buddy Hield is even in the realm of a Klay Thompson, but he still is one of the best three-point shooters in all of basketball. So looking at that, I think it's going to be a seamless fit. I think it's going to be more of Buddy Hield being able to move without the ball, what you saw him do more so in Indiana, which he had a lot of success with. Compared to Philadelphia, it's more of like a catch-and-shoot, stand-still kind of offense. I feel like that's kind of where Buddy Hield struggled a little bit in Philadelphia at times. But I feel like with the Warriors' more free-flowing offense, I feel like it's going to be really nice to see somebody like Buddy Hield be able to get off, and I feel like he's going to be able to get his touches. In terms of him, I think bench-wise, and those three additions alone are huge for this Warriors team. They actually have veteran presence coming off the bench, three guys that can really do a little bit of everything. And Kyle Anderson, D'Anthony Melton is a Swiss Army knife guard that can really take on the assignment. I feel like you can kind of see a world where somebody like Gary Payton II kind of gets phased out a little bit. And as much as I love Gary Payton II as a player, D'Anthony Melton and him kind of do the same thing, and I can see those styles kind of clashing, because I think D'Anthony Melton is a way better offensive player than Gary Payton II. And that's what the Golden State Warriors are going to need off this bench. They need this bench unit to be one of the best offensive benches in all of basketball. I think D'Anthony Melton and Buddy Hield can be a great direction towards that, along with somebody like a Trace Jackson Davis, who I don't know if I'm going to have starting or coming off the bench yet. So looking at that, I feel like those are three great additions, but a lot of fans and a lot of people just out in the NBA world are kind of upset that the Golden State Warriors obviously missed out on somebody like Lauri Markkanen. Now, hindsight looking at it, and the deal didn't go through because they didn't want to trade Podziemski. They feel like he's the guard of the future, not the successor to like Steph Curry or anything, but the guard of the future, somebody that they can hopefully maybe not build around, I wouldn't say, but kind of be a key young piece on this roster that can help build for the future, right? And I'm perfectly fine with that because Brandon Podziemski is somebody that is good enough already to be competing and going in on a playoff run with this Golden State Warriors team with all the things he does, especially like his rebounding ability. He's just like the perfect, I think me and my friends were talking about this a couple months or weeks ago, I think Brandon Podziemski is kind of a completely different player if he's not drafted by the Warriors. This is where I feel like drafting and situation is a perfect thing in the NBA. When you look at somebody like Podziemski, his play style fits perfectly with what the Warriors want to do. The only thing that questions me is like, is the shot going to be consistent going into next year? But I feel like everything else he provides for you. He doesn't turn the ball over. He's a great rebounder for his size. He was averaging like 6 to 8 rebounds a game at one point during a stretch last year. So looking at that, he is a perfect complementary piece to what they have on this roster. The only question I have is like, what does that offensive look like? I think he's a great offensive player. He has the potential to be a really good offensive player, but like, is the shot going to stay consistent? What does his offense now look like in a different role, in a large expanded role, possibly just starting next to Steph Curry? So I wonder what that looks like. Interested to see how he develops. And then we're getting into like Jonathan Kuminga, looking at him like he's trying to get paid, and I feel like this is going to be a big year for him towards the back half of that season. He was great. He was by far the second best scorer on the team next to Steph Curry. Offensively, getting downhill, getting to the basket, and the shot is seemingly starting to come around with more and more confidence. It's in now to Steve Kerr to give him a longer leash because they're going to need him. They're going to need his scoring. They're going to need his defense and his just ability to get downhill, because this is something the Warriors don't really have. They don't really have anybody that's like getting downhill and putting pressure on the rim. So Jonathan Kuminga is somebody that can definitely do that, and he's going into a situation now where he's wanting to get paid. So I think Jonathan Kuminga is a huge piece of what this Warriors team is going to be looking like going forward. I don't know how much he's worth at this point in time because you've got to take the sample size with due. That back half of the year was great for Jonathan Kuminga, but what does it look like in more of an expanded role? Klay Thompson was eating up a lot of shots, a lot of opportunity, even when Klay Thompson was coming off the bench. So now in Jonathan Kuminga, and I want to say a starting caliber role, what does that look like for him? Can he remain efficient and everything else like that? Because he's still a very young player. But I feel like this is going to be a huge year. But I'm putting this more so on Steve Kerr, and Steve Kerr being able to unlock and develop somebody like a Jonathan Kuminga going forward. In terms of something I see being like the X factor for this team, I think it's Andrew Wiggins. I think Andrew Wiggins is coming off of two really down years compared to how Andrew Wiggins we saw when the Golden State Warriors won a championship a couple years ago. They need to find a way to unlock that back. I know he's kind of been in trade circles and everything else like that, but Andrew Wiggins is somebody that has elite defensive potential. We saw that during the playoff run, guarding a Luka Doncic, a Jason Tatum, a Jaylen Brown. We saw that during the playoff run. So looking at this, Andrew Wiggins is the X factor for me because I kind of am expecting AirPods and Jonathan Kuminga to develop, and I think they're going to be great once they do develop, and it's really about Steve Kerr unlocking those two guys, but we know what we're getting from Andrew Wiggins. We know the ceiling of Andrew Wiggins on this team. We know he can provide this team, but it's really like, what kind of Andrew Wiggins are you going to get? He had a very sour ending in a bad playing game versus Sacramento Kings, but I feel like with the right mindset and kind of reinstilling that confidence, which is easier said than done for Andrew Wiggins, because he's somebody that has kind of also been plagued and really has kind of played his way out of the game at times. But he's the X factor because he is somebody that can be that second to third leading scorer on any given night, and he can give you elite level defense and rebounding, which is from a Golden State team that is usually pretty small. Like, again, going into this year, they're going to need that version of Andrew Wiggins that is crashing the glass and giving you 7 to 8 rebounds a game like he was on that playoff run. So he's the X factor to me. His play is going to really be indicating factor of how this Golden State Warriors season and how it looks at the end of it. Now, going into expectations, I still feel like kind of the same thing with the Lakers. The Warriors are still one move away. I love what they have done this offseason, but I still feel like the Warriors are just one step away, and I don't really think Lauri Markkanen was that step. I know a lot of people are kind of disappointed that move didn't happen, or they're going to criticize the Warriors for not moving off from Podziemski to go get Lauri Markkanen. But even with Lauri Markkanen on this roster, I think fit-wise, it's huge. I think the spacing and the ability he has, I could already see the lineups of him and Draymond in the front court running a lot of small ball with Lauri at the 5 and being able to space. But the deal wasn't able to get done, and he signed the extension with Utah. But I think it will be a blessing in disguise that this move didn't happen for the Warriors, because I feel like there could be something better on the deadline that could be able for them to get something cheaper. I understand Lauri Markkanen was younger and he seemed like a perfect fitting piece, but the price you were going to have to give up, which is future draft capital and Brandon Podziemski, somebody who the organization obviously loves, has a young talent. There's going to be another move to make at the deadline. I don't know what that move is. Let me know in the comments of interesting guys that could possibly be traded at the deadline to the Golden State Warriors. I've seen them have no real interest in a Zach LaVine trade or a Brandon Ingram trade, which I feel like those are good concerns to have, because both of those players have had injury concerns, and they're Brandon Ingram looking for a new extension, and Zach LaVine is already on a big contract as well. So the Golden State Warriors have kind of played their cards right, in my opinion, by going and adding some depth to the bench. And I really do hope guys like Trey Jackson-Davis and Moses Moody continue to develop off that bench. So looking at that, I feel like maybe the Golden State Warriors just kind of being a little bit patient, waiting for the moves to come and waiting to see what they have right now in their hands, and then being at the deadline, teams start getting a little desperate at the deadline with all these teams trying to compete for the playoffs and everything else like that. I think they're going to be able to get the guy that they want. Maybe not a great fit like Lauri Markkanen. I thought Lauri Markkanen was the perfect fit, but I feel like they're going to be able to get a good enough player at the deadline to really help this team turn around and compete. And I feel like time will tell with this team. I still feel like you have one of the deepest rosters in the NBA, but in terms of what I feel like outside of just like trades, I think if this roster was staying the same, this is obviously a play-in team still, unless you get some magnificent, insane season from Steph Curry and Andrew Wiggins turns back the clock to that 2022 season. It's really going to be interesting to see what this team is looking like. I feel like they still have the depth to really go on some runs, and I feel like offensively this team can really be very versatile, especially with the development of a Jonathan Kuminga. But it's going to be interesting to see. I think this is a play-in team still. It comes down to the move they make at the deadline. I feel like this team is desperately looking for, and they're going to be searching heavily at the deadline for that player to push them over the top, especially where they are in the standings. I feel like it's going to be interesting to see if they're a top 6 to 7 team out west by deadline time. Then things get real interesting, because I feel like they're going to be very active in that market. But I do love the additions they have made this offseason. The main question I have for this Golden State Warriors team going into this next season is basically what I kind of just got done saying. Can they make a big-time move? Who do you move in that big-time move? Is it Andrew Wiggins plus draft capital? Do you find a trade to where you're moving off of Jonathan Kuminga or Brandon Podziemski? But I don't think they do either one of those deals. I know Jonathan Kuminga was in the Paul George trade that almost happened, that didn't happen, and I know Brandon Podziemski was taken out of Utah Jazz discussions for Lauri Markkanen, and that's why that deal fell flat. So it's interesting to see what moves they do look to do at the deadline. I'm interested to see. That's kind of the main question. What do they do at the deadline? Because I think this team is prime and they're still a move away. But I like what they've done this offseason to kind of keep them afloat until that time passes, because they do have some young talent that I think is going to develop really well. And Jonathan Kuminga, Podziemski, hopefully Moses Moody gets some more playing time, and then Trey Jackson-Davis as well. So looking at that, that's kind of all I have for the Golden State Warriors on this deep dive. Thank you guys for tuning into the Barrel Talk podcast. Hope you tune in to future episodes.